July 10th, 2025. Deep inside the Darien jungle, 2,000 United States Special Forces stormed a fortress run by ex-Special Forces brothers Lucas and Jared Stone, the masterminds behind a human trafficking empire that enslaved over 5,000 and abducted 126 Americans. In just 3 hours, the notorious stronghold called El Silencio fell. More than 3,000 cartel fighters were neutralized, 2,000 lives were saved, and not a single U.S. soldier or hostage died. But how did America achieve the impossible against a militia of 3,000, protected by civilian shields and a fortress no raid had ever breached? The answer begins with the true face of the world's deadliest cartel. Lucas and Jared Stone built their militia from the ground up, turning jungle recruits into a 3,000-strong fighting force. Training was not left to chance. New arrivals drilled for weeks in squads, learning close-quarters tactics, copied straight from United States field manuals. Every fighter cycled through marksmanship, ambush techniques, and night maneuvers, their routines enforced by former, non-commissioned officers, most drawn from failed states or ex-paramilitaries. By 2025, this militia operated in platoons, each commanded by a loyalist with years of combat experience. Defenses matched the ambition of their leaders. El Silencio sprawled over 37 square miles, but every approach was engineered for delay. Dense undergrowth was seeded with pressure mines. Over 200 camouflaged bunkers, sunk deep and lined with scavenged ceramic plates, blocked heat signatures and absorbed drone strikes. Each bunker linked to an underground network, letting gunmen move unseen between sectors. Watchtowers, disguised as water tanks, held spotters with encrypted radios, able to call in mortar fire within 60 seconds of a breach. Logistics ran on stolen military supplies and cartel ingenuity. Armories held RPGs, surplus M4 rifles, and crates of Eastern Bloc ammunition. Defensive drills played out weekly, simulated United States raids, rapid evacuation of command centers, and blackout protocols when satellites passed overhead. Instructors drilled fighters to hold fire at the first sign of helicopters, waiting instead for the signal to detonate charges set along the only paved access road. The jungle itself was a weapon. Rivers wound through the compound, creating natural moats. Sinkholes, some over 14 feet deep, lay covered by brush and false trails, a trap for any force moving too quickly. The Stone brothers oversaw all of this, their military pedigree visible in every defensive layer. Their fighters held the line not just with guns, but with the certainty that until July 10th, El Silencio had never been breached. More than 5,000 men, women, and children vanished into El Silencio's shadow. Their names erased, their futures sold off in pieces. The Stone brothers' empire did not simply rely on guns and mercenaries. At its core was an industrial-scale human trafficking machine, organized, relentless, and almost invisible from the outside. Migrants funneled north through the Darien jungle paid everything they owned for a promise of safe passage. Most found themselves instead herded into classrooms that doubled as holding pens or clinics where doctors performed surgeries the patients would never recover from. Each facility, designed to mimic a civilian outpost from above, served a dual purpose: shield the cartel's infrastructure from attack and mask the movement of prisoners through underground corridors. Behind every locked door, a calculation. Children marked for organ harvesting, tagged by age and blood type. Adults chained in workshops, forced to assemble munitions or process cocaine. The Stones' lieutenants rotated guards weekly, ensuring no personal connections could threaten the flow of bodies or compromise security. At least 126 U.S. citizens, confirmed by intercepted communications, entered El Silencio and simply disappeared. For every hidden prison, a school or a family apartment above ground. The camouflage was intentional. Every strike risked collateral bloodshed. Every hesitation bought the cartel more time. The stones weaponized compassion. Any armed incursion faced a gauntlet of human shields. Families, elderly, pregnant women, deliberately relocated beside command bunkers and arms depots. Every defensive line was stitched together with the lives of the innocent, a living armor against the very idea of rescue. For 4 years, this calculus held. No government dared an assault that might slaughter hostages by the hundreds. With every failed raid, with every international condemnation, the stone's grip tightened. The world watched. The cells stayed full. And inside El Silencio, hope became a kind of currency, bought, traded, and stolen in the silence. 2022 dry season, pre-dawn. Recon Team Bravo moved through what they thought was a shallow gully, a mapped low point just 5 kilometers from El Silencio's southern perimeter. The lead operator's thermal scope picked up no movement. 30 seconds later, a surface-to-air missile, Soviet-made, streaked out from beneath a canopy of vines. The blast killed the team's point man instantly, shrapnel tearing through night vision gear. 2 more missiles followed, one aimed at the extraction bird, the other at a responding quick reaction force. 19 Americans died before sunrise. Not a single radio call made it out before the jungle swallowed the wreckage. The ambush was textbook. A false trail, thermal dummies rigged with heating coils, and a kill zone bracketed by pre-registered mortar tubes. Recovery teams found only scorched plate carriers, melted communications, and dog tags hammered flat to prevent identification by cartel trophy takers. 1 year later, July 2023, a 12-man Pathfinder team, Ranger and Marine mix, vanished along the river corridor north of the fortress. Their last encrypted message: crossing Sector Tango, all clear. At dawn, nothing but static. Search drones returned images of trampled brush and 2 rifles, their stocks painted with cartel insignia. Weeks of grid sweeps revealed pit traps cut into the riverbank, camouflaged with palm fronds and laced with punji stakes. The jungle amplified every mistake. Heat signatures blurred against the canopy, mud sucked boots from feet, and movement slowed to a crawl. Operators trained for urban clearance found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy who planted explosives in tree hollows and looped claymore tripwires around rain-slick roots. Every failed attempt left a lesson written in blood. The jungle was not just a backdrop, it was a living defense, tuned by the stones to punish speed and caution alike. No safe approach, no guaranteed extraction. For U.S. planners, every loss reinforced a single point: El Silencio would not fall to brute force or routine. Only total tactical overmatch had a chance. Mud, heat, and silence, every step toward El Silencio invited collapse. The Dari 9N jungle was alive with hazards no manual could prepare for. Beneath tangled roots, sinkholes ran 14 feet deep, hidden by mats of leaves. Operators mapped their routes in inches, not miles, knowing a single misstep could swallow a team whole. The canopy above was just as hostile, bending radio waves and shrouding movement in static. Intelligence officers raised warnings. Communications would be ripped apart the moment troops crossed into the grid. Enemy jammers, buried in riverbanks and disguised as weather stations, could scramble GPS signals within seconds, cutting units off from command and from each other. But the threat was not just physical. In Washington, the front lines took a different shape. Lawmakers demanded a solution that would save lives, not headlines. Congressional leaders, briefed on the growing lists of missing citizens and foreign hostages, pressed for action without error. As reports of new atrocities leaked, children tagged for organ harvesting, families sold in batches. The pressure mounted. Every day without intervention drew fresh scrutiny from the Hill. The Pentagon's war planners found themselves navigating not just jungle, but a maze of policy demands and political deadlines. Precision was not optional. The risk of a botched strike, one that might kill the very people it meant to save, loomed over every decision. The old doctrine of overwhelming force would be worse than useless here. It would be catastrophic. Analysts pored over satellite data, biometric intercepts, traffic patterns, hunting for any tool that could cut through the chaos without unleashing it. The jungle, the politics, and the promise of imminent bloodshed all converged on a single point. The operation would be forced to rely on technology that could see through mud, metal, and misdirection, and strike only where human hands could not reach. That urgency, born in the dirt and sharpened in committee hearings, would soon drive the search for a solution beyond any old-school playbook. At 02:17 hours, the first data burst hit the command tent at Forward Base Echo. Recon operators exchanged glances. 30 square miles mapped, every contour, every tree line, every bunker heat signature lit up on their wrist displays. The jungle's old trick, smothering movement, swallowing radio signals, was finished. Above the canopy, Sentinel satellites swept their grid. Each pass, an 11-second interval, stitched the battlefield into a living map, updating troop locations, scanned for hidden munitions, and flagged the faintest irregularity in heat or radio traffic. No longer just blips and static. Now, a digital overlay, infrared ghosts of gunmen, cold bunkers, even the shifting shapes of families huddled near supply dumps, fed straight into the operator's augmented reality visors. The MQ-20 Avenger drones circled high, invisible to the eye but ever present on the network. Each one chose its own flight pattern, rerouting in microseconds as new data poured in. Their multispectral sensors cut through both fog and jungle canopy, parsing between armed patrols and unarmed crowds. Where human sight blurred, the drones drew hard lines. Weapons glinted as red silhouettes, radios pulsed blue, and every civilian, down to the smallest child, glowed green in the AR overlays. Operators could track movement in real time, watching as cartel sentries shifted bunkers, or as children were herded away from blast zones by the Stone's lieutenants. No one was left guessing. The Sentinel network linked every platform, drone, ground team, even armored columns, into one shared battlefield. Each unit saw what the others saw. Recon could flag a suspected booby trap with a tap, and within seconds, the entire task force rerouted. If a cartel fighter flickered across a heat map, operators could isolate, tag, and track that signature, without risking a single step into an ambush. The jungle's old advantage, confusion, delay, the fog of war, melted under the weight of AI. Every movement was logged, every pattern analyzed, every possible threat calculated before boots touched mud. For the ground teams, the difference was immediate. Patrol leaders watched their route projections update in real time, AR visors drawing green lanes through the maze of pits and tripwires. The terrain's danger signals, minefields, jammers, sinkholes, flashed as digital signposts. Techs back at HQ reran models, adjusting for rainfall, canopy density, even likely civilian sleeping spots. The result? No blind corners, no accidental crossings into hostage sectors, no missed signals. Operators advanced, knowing that, for once, the jungle hid nothing but what the network allowed. The Stone's fortress, mapped, measured, and awaiting the first breach. At precisely 02:59, the first electronic warfare package moved into place above El Silencio. Operators at Forward Base Echo brought Sentinel's jammers online, flooding the grid with white noise. Every cartel frequency, encrypted radios, cell towers, even repurposed military comms, went dead. Networked arrays pulsed at calculated intervals, blinding enemy radar and shattering the rhythm of Cartel spotters. For the first time in 4 years, the jungle's defenders could not call for help or detonate remote explosives by radio. Simultaneously, 12 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles launched from offshore destroyers streaked across the sky. Each missile carried a dual payload, a precision-guided warhead, and an AI core, fed live targeting data from Sentinel's constellation. When a school dormitory was flagged as occupied, heat signatures, biometric tags, children's movement patterns, the missile rerouted mid-flight, adjusting its trajectory to strike secondary command posts. In the seconds before impact, the AI cross-checked every sensor feed, confirming the absence of civilians before authorizing explosive release. Of 43 programmed strikes, not a single missile landed within 30 meters of a green-tagged heat signature. On the ground, the operations architects watched as the first 4 command bunkers vanished, obliterated in synchronized pairs to prevent any single security officer from triggering mass detonation protocols. Next, the Tomahawks targeted the radar grid. 6 hardened towers, each shielded by layers of scavenged ceramic. The missile's penetrator tips and real-time targeting left no margin for human error. By 0306, every major radar site was dark. Cartel anti-air batteries, their guidance jammed, fired blindly into empty canopy. The drones above did not fire blindly. MQ-20 Avengers hovered in holding patterns, each linked to HiveMind's decision engine. Their targeting software parsed heat, shape, and movement, separating armed from unarmed, fighters from families. Twice, a missile rerouted in microseconds, aborting a strike on a suspected arms cache when Sentinel flagged a hidden group of hostages being marched below. The AI reroute protocol, tested in Nevada and verified in Panama, operated with a failure rate below 1 in 1,000, according to Navy logs. Below, U.S. Army Rangers tracked the digital battle in their visors. Each strike appeared as a flash: red for confirmed enemy targets, blue for disrupted jammers. The ground teams advanced, synced to the rhythm of destruction above, knowing that every bunker breach had already been mapped, every civilian corridor left untouched. For the Stone's gunners, the loss of comms and radar meant confusion and delay. For the Americans, it meant the first clear path through a fortress that had swallowed every attempt before. Precision was not an abstract promise. It was a lived fact, confirmed by every drone feed and missile telemetry graph, clearing the way for a ground assault measured in meters, not casualties. 0300 hours. The jungle erupts with a silence only machines can muster. 4 command nodes, deep set, ceramic armored, vanish before alarms can ring. Each MQ-20 Avenger has already marked its prey, its AI reading heat, movement, and weapons glint, calculating 1,000 trajectories in the time it takes a sentry to blink. Drones pick their targets: 1 bunker commander, 2 relay posts, a jammer hub, then peel away the jungle's armor with pinpoint fire. In less than 22 seconds, the Stone's comms grid is peeled. By 0302, 6 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles cross the horizon, their warheads rewriting the fortress's skyline. Radar towers crumble as AI-guided payloads veer mid-flight, rerouting to avoid a shifting knot of hostages hustled at gunpoint from a nearby shed. 28 meters. Too close for human confidence. The missile's guidance calls an abort, looping toward a secondary target. The Eastern Relay, already flagged by Sentinel overlays as clear. Debris falls, but not a single green-tagged shape is caught in the blast radius. Below the smoke, U.S. Army Rangers move. Their visors flicker. Red lines for confirmed enemy, green for civilians, blue for neutralized jammers. In staggered squads, Rangers advance, each man's route etched by Sentinel's hand. Minefields mapped, tripwires flagged, sinkholes skirted. By 0315, the southern and western perimeters are breached. The first Stryker vehicles grind over log barricades, their sensors linked to the same live feed that guides every step. No stray rounds, no accidental crossfire. Each squad reaches its mark as the last of the Stone's spotters lose radio contact. Inside the compound, confusion reigns. Cartel fighters flail for orders that never come. The old calculus, wait, listen, detonate, crumbles when every signal jams. Every fallback drilled for years suddenly obsolete. For the first time, defenders see their lines melt not from a hail of bullets, but from the absence of any command at all. U.S. forces push into the breach, not with a roar, but with the cold certainty of a plan that left nothing to chance. The assault's opening minutes belong not to gunfire, but to algorithms, a front line drawn by data, secured by men who trust in its precision. The fortress, once impenetrable, is now exposed. Hostage sectors, mapped and untouched, await rescue teams already moving through cleared corridors. The clock runs forward. Momentum now favors the attackers, and every lost second is a window slammed shut on the Stone's last hopes. At 3:27, the first hostages crossed the threshold into daylight, children blinking at searchlights, arms marked with code tags for surgical procedures that would never be performed. Marine raiders moved in tandem, clearing room after room with orders issued in clipped bursts. Every extraction was logged by visor, each civilian escorted through corridors mapped by sentinel overlays. The raiders' pace was relentless, coordination honed by weeks of AR rehearsals and live feed from the drones above. Stryker medics triaged trauma cases on the move, stabilizing malnourished survivors and administering field antibiotics from packs slung over armor. Inside the network of bunkers, the air hung thick with chlorine and the stench of diesel. Raiders swept hallways, tagging empty cells and marking hazards for follow-up. Where cartel fighters clung to the hope of a last stand, Abrams tanks answered with finality. By 3:42, the barricades shielding the deepest tunnels had collapsed under the weight of 120mm heat rounds. The steel doors, once thought impenetrable, buckled and fell inward as breaching charges detonated in rapid sequence. Each detonation echoed through the ground, breaking the rhythm of panic in the captive sectors above. Armored crews coordinated with ground teams via encrypted comms. Every tank movement synchronized to avoid crossfire or accidental breach into marked civilian areas. The Marines pressed forward through smoke and debris, their progress tracked in real time by commanders who watched the digital map update, green dots blossoming in cleared sectors. By 5 o'clock, the final bunker, once the stronghold for the Stone's inner circle, was silenced. Rangers confirmed over comms. All hostages accounted for. No friendly or civilian casualties. The casualty reports, triple-checked against biometric ID and helmet cam footage, showed 0 losses. For the first time, the number of lives saved eclipsed every projection. 2,019 civilians, from infants to the elderly, emerged from beneath El Silencio. Not a single bullet had gone astray. Not a single rescuer failed to return. As daylight filtered through the ruins, the operation's architects stood down. Marine raiders lined the compound's edge, rifles lowered, sweat streaked with mud. Abrams crews powered down engines, their treads still warm from the night's advance. Hostages clutched blankets, some collapsing in relief, others silent with shock. In 3 hours, the Stone's fortress, fortified for years with blood and steel, had become the site of a liberation measured not in destruction, but in lives reclaimed. The final reports, sent up the chain, confirmed what the operation's planners had promised. Unparalleled speed, absolute precision, and not a single lost soul. In just 3 hours on July 10, 2025, Operation Iron Justice saw over 2,000 U.S. troops neutralize 3,337 cartel fighters and rescue 2,000 civilians from El Silencio, the largest and most heavily defended cartel fortress in the Darien jungle. The assault marked a turning point in modern warfare, using artificial intelligence-powered drones and precision missiles to achieve zero U.S. casualties, a first in operations of this scale. Official records confirm that all hostages were extracted safely, and the Stone Brothers militia was dismantled. Yet several details remain classified, including the final whereabouts of Lucas and Jared Stone, and the fate of the 12-person recon team lost in 2023. As of now, congressional hearings continue to review the operation's long-term impact on cartel networks and regional stability. Operation Iron Justice stands as evidence that technology and coordination can overcome even the most entrenched criminal empires, but the full consequences and some answers are still out of reach.
Japanese fighter pilots once ruled the Pacific, confident their Zeros were untouchable. Then came a new enemy, an American monster they called the Hellcat. It could shrug off their gunfire. The bullets bounced off them and outclimb even Japan's best. Suddenly, aces who had been hunters became the hunted, their hard-won tactics useless against a machine built for speed, firepower, and mass production. Morale shattered as rookies and Hellcats shot down veterans, and whispers spread. Was Japan's era of aerial supremacy over for good? This is the untold story behind the Japanese fighter pilots who feared this 400-mile-per-hour American monster, how a single aircraft flipped the balance of power, and what happened the moment fear took wing. Saburo Sakai scans the horizon, sweat stinging his eyes. Once, the sight of American fighters meant easy kills. Now, something else stalks the skies. A machine neither his bullets nor his training can stop. The news spreads fast. A rookie named Duncan just took down Sueda, a seasoned Japanese ace, by following him straight up, a move that should have left any enemy stalling and helpless, except the Hellcat kept coming. Sakai's own guns, 500 rounds pouring into Grumman metal, did nothing. A Zero would have been a ball of fire by now, he mutters, disbelief tightening his chest. No one trusts their old tricks. Pilots return from sorties shaken, recounting stories of American planes absorbing shattering hits and outclimbing the hunters. In the mess halls, nervous laughter tries to drown out the panic rising behind every glance. The phrase echoes, the guns bounced off them. Morale, once unbreakable, starts to slip. Veterans wonder if their edge, their invincibility, is gone. Next sorties, the cockiness is missing. Now every takeoff carries a shadow. Will anything work against this new monster? Lieutenant Commander John Thack leans over his kitchen table, sliding matchsticks into patterns that might save lives. He's hunting for a way to keep his outgunned pilots alive against Zero aces who seem to own the sky. What he discovers will turn the entire war upside down. The tactic is simple, at least on paper. Two Hellcats fly parallel, weaving toward and away from each other like gears in a watch. The moment a Zero dives on one, the other swings in behind the attacker, forcing Japanese pilots into a deadly crossfire. This move, soon called the Thack Weave, doesn't demand years of training or sharp reflexes. It just requires trust and timing. Thack's own squadron tests it over the Solomons, and for the first time, rookies start returning from battles with kill marks on their fuselages. Veterans who once relied on instinct and solo duels now find themselves outmaneuvered by American teams working in perfect sync. Japanese pilots, used to chasing lone prey, now struggle to keep up as the Hellcats pull each other out of trouble and strike back with overwhelming force. What once felt like a contest of individual skill becomes a brutal math of cooperation and firepower. On the ground, Thack's matchsticks gather dust, but in the air above the Pacific, his idea shatters the old order. At the Grumman factory in Bethpage, sparks flew day and night. The Hellcat was not built for beauty or pedigree. Every rivet and weld aimed at one thing: numbers. In just 2.5 years, Grumman's lines rolled out 12,275 F-6F Hellcats, more than 8 for every single Kawanishi N1K Japan could muster. Each hour, another fighter left the floor, ready for the carrier decks of the Pacific. Grumman's engineers called it the Ironworks for a reason. Prototypes left the drafting table and reached combat squadrons before their blueprints even cooled. Japanese technicians, meanwhile, sweated over the N1K at Naruo, where skilled hands shaped each fighter in small batches. In 1944, peak production barely broke 100 planes per month. B-29 raids scattered assembly to dozens of makeshift sites, causing a 20% loss even as demand soared. The Shiidankai's design pushed the limits of craftsmanship, but every improvement meant more delays, more special parts, more strain on a shrinking workforce. By war's end, fewer than 1,500 N1Ks had ever left the line, many grounded by unreliable Homar engines or a lack of spares. While Japan's best engineers chased refinement, America flooded the sky with Hellcats, fast to build, easy to repair, and always arriving in overwhelming force. Flight instructors at Pensacola grinned when they watched a new recruit take his seat in the Hellcat. The cockpit, perched high above the wing, offered a clear view of the deck, a simple but crucial advantage for carrier landings. Every control, from throttle to cowl flaps, sat within easy reach. Grumman engineers had not just built a machine, they designed a workspace where even a 19-year-old from Nebraska, with barely 200 hours behind him, could land on a moving ship and walk away smiling. Gone were the long checklists and twitchy takeoffs that haunted earlier planes. The Hellcat's broad landing gear shrugged off hard touchdowns. Foldable wings, locked into place with a single handle, meant more fighters on crowded decks and faster turnarounds between missions. Carrier qualification, once the realm of seasoned veterans, was now within reach for thousands of new pilots. Each farm boy who climbed out of the cockpit ready for combat was proof that the war in the air no longer belonged to a select few. It belonged to anyone who could see over the dash, follow orders, and keep a steady hand on the stick. Night brought no comfort. Japanese crews once expected darkness to hide their approach, but now mysterious blips tracked them from beyond sight. Hellcats, fitted with APS-6 radar pods under their wings, began hunting after sunset. November 18, 1943, pilots from VFN-76 intercepted 5 Betty bombers over the Pacific, shooting them down in a sweep that stunned both sides. The Bettys went down in flames, Wellwood and Lefevre guiding their attacks by radar glow alone. Every radio crackled with the news. Not even night skies were safe anymore. Just days later, Butch O'Hare launched on a night patrol from USS Enterprise, leading the first carrier team ever to hunt by radar. Tracers stitched the dark, a Betty's gunner firing blind. Then, O'Hare's Hellcat vanished without a trace. Some say it was enemy fire. Others whisper about friendly guns in the confusion. Either way, the message spread fast. By night or day, the American monster was everywhere and nowhere to hide. The Shiidankai soared onto the scene with 4 20mm cannons and automatic combat flaps, a technical marvel in a shrinking arsenal. Veteran crews squeezed every ounce of performance from engines that seized mid-fight, while parts shortages left many N1Ks grounded. Each sortie became a gamble, as Allied raids scattered factories and fresh replacements never arrived. For the last Japanese ace pilots, mastery was no longer enough. The sky filled with Hellcats, and even their finest fighter could not turn the numbers game around. By 1945, over 12,000 Hellcats had rolled off American assembly lines, each designed for rapid training and brutal reliability. Japanese aces described their shock, recalling, "Our guns bounced off them." The arrival of the Hellcat and tactics like the Thak Weave ended Japanese aerial dominance, turning skilled veterans into outmatched survivors. U.S. pilots, with just 200 hours of training, achieved kill ratios of nearly 19-1, evidence that industrial scale and ergonomic design could overwhelm craftsmanship. When the advanced N1K Shiidankai finally reached the front, chronic engine failures and shattered supply lines meant it was too late. Many Japanese records about pilot morale and unit losses remain classified or lost. Yet, the documented shift from Zero to Hellcat marked more than a technological victory. It showed how mass production and teamwork could decide a war. In the Pacific skies, the Hellcat's legacy endures as proof that even the best pilots cannot win alone against the weight of industry and innovation.
At 4:42 a.m., the USS Harry S. Truman sailed through the world's most vital shipping artery, a floating fortress at the heart of America's power. Suddenly, alarms shattered the silence. 15 ballistic missiles and over 20 drones, launched from Yemen, targeted the carrier, testing advanced defenses against a threat no admiral expected to face. Some intercepts came within seconds of disaster. Within minutes, the world saw America's answer, a wave of precision strikes that changed the region overnight. But what brought the Truman into the crosshairs? And how close did the world come to chaos on the morning when the USS Truman took a direct hit? The stakes begin here. 12% of all global trade flows through a corridor only 20 miles wide. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, where the Red Sea narrows between Yemen and Djibouti, is more than a line on the map. It is the world's bottleneck. Every day, tankers loaded with oil, container ships stacked high with electronics, grain, and medicine, and bulk carriers carrying raw materials pass through these waters. In 2024, that traffic carried nearly $1 trillion worth of goods, bound for ports in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. But when the first missiles arced over the horizon, the world's supply lines suddenly looked fragile. The numbers reveal the scale of exposure. Nearly 90% of container shipping companies rerouted their vessels around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. After Houthi attacks spiked, that detour adds more than 3,500 nautical miles. 2 weeks of travel, millions in fuel costs, and untold ripple effects on global supply chains. Freight prices from Shanghai to Rotterdam soared by 256% in just 8 weeks. By February 2025, only 200 cargo ships transited the Red Sea each month, down from over 2,000 before the crisis began. The Truman's presence was not just about military power. It was about keeping the arteries of commerce open. For every hour, the carrier's radar swept the horizon. Billions in global trade kept moving. But the threat was not abstract. The region's instability rippled outward. Food prices spiked in Africa, manufacturing schedules in Europe slipped, and energy markets from Singapore to Houston braced for shocks. Insurance premiums for Red Sea transits skyrocketed, and some shipping lines warned that a single successful strike could close the corridor entirely. The world's economy balanced on a razor's edge. The Truman, with its strike group fanned out across the choke point, became a shield, not just for American interests, but for anyone who depended on the free flow of goods, from diesel in Berlin to rice in Lagos. The ship's mission was clear: deter attacks, reassure allies, and keep the world's most vital shipping lane open. In these waters, the difference between routine and crisis was measured in seconds, and the consequences of failure would be felt across continents. The economic stakes were not just numbers. They were the pulse of a connected world, beating through a single, narrow strait. In the darkness, beyond the Truman's running lights, the enemy waited. Across the hills of Yemen, launch crews watched their screens as coordinates were fed, relays checked, and encrypted orders flashed green. The weapon of choice, Birkin-2H, a medium-range ballistic missile with a reach of 650 miles. Each one, a steel-bodied message built for the express purpose of breaking through layered defenses. The launchers themselves, mobile and camouflaged, moved under tarps and palm fronds, their operators trained by men who spoke Farsi as well as Arabic, advisors from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. But the arsenal did not end with rockets. The Samad-3 drone, long and narrow with its distinctive V-tail, could loiter for hours, crossing 1,500 kilometers of open water on a single tank of fuel. These drones flew low, hugging the sea, almost invisible to radar, their engines muffled to a whisper. Some carried warheads. Others carried cameras, relaying live images of ships in the strait, feeding targeting data back to command posts deep inland. The Samad-3 was not a single-use threat. It was a persistent hunter, able to circle and wait for its moment. From the Bab el-Mandeb to the outskirts of Sana'a, the network was dense. Smugglers ran missile components through Eritrean ports. Technicians in Sana'a's suburbs assembled guidance packages and warheads under the watchful eyes of IRGC trainers. In the months leading up to the crisis, United Nations investigators traced the serial numbers on recovered missile fragments, each weld, each circuit board, a signature of Iranian design. The supply lines never ran dry for long. The strategy was simple: overwhelm, confuse, and strike. Missiles would arc high, their trajectories plotted to arrive in waves. Drones would swamp the horizon, some jamming radars, others seeking out the gaps. The Houthis had learned from every failed shot. They adapted, shifting launch times, mixing cruise missiles with ballistic, using decoys and electronic interference. Every launch was a rehearsal for the next, each failure a lesson for the future. For the Truman, the threat was not theoretical. The carrier's silhouette, lit by the faint glow of the deck operations, was a target painted on every Houthi command center wall. The ship's very presence in the strait was a challenge, a provocation. In the war rooms of Sana'a, commanders watched satellite feeds and awaited the order, knowing that a single missile breaking through could halt the flow of commerce for a generation. In these waters, the enemy's reach was not measured in miles, but in moments. At 4:42 a.m., the outer shield came alive. USS Gravely and USS Mason, both riding the edge of Truman's protective arc, caught the first signatures, 15 ballistic missiles streaking in high from the Yemeni coast. Some dove from the upper atmosphere, others arced low, their trajectories crossing in a pattern meant to overwhelm. The Aegis combat system, decades in the making and never before tested at this scale, began its work. SPY-1 radars painted the sky with invisible beams, tracking each warhead against a backdrop of electronic static and sea clutter. No hesitation. SM-6 interceptors launched in pairs, their boosters flaring white against the black water. Each missile carried its own seeker, hunting through jamming and decoys, guided by the networked logic of Aegis. In the first 30 seconds, 6 intercepts registered, mid-course kills confirmed by digital echoes, and the sudden disappearance of hostile tracks. SM-2s followed, firing in staggered sequence to catch what the first volley missed. The air above the destroyers twisted with contrails, angry scars marking the collision of American engineering and Iranian hardware. Missile after missile vanished from the plot. The system's logic prioritized speed and angle, assigning each threat to the nearest available tube. Crewmen in the Combat Information Center watched as threat rings contracted, then winked out. Lieutenant Commander Brian Hawkins, manning radar operations, later described this moment as a blur of commands and confirmations. No time for doubt, just the rhythm of lock, launch, impact. The first successful intercepts of SM-6 in combat became more than a footnote. They were the difference between routine and catastrophe. Drones, too, came in waves, but the outer shield held. Ballistic warheads broke apart miles above the sea, their fragments burning out before reaching the carrier's formation. The Aegis system, designed for a world of Cold War standoffs, now proved itself in the chaos of real attack. 15 inbound, 15 neutralized, the first line unbroken. For the sailors below deck, it was a victory measured in silence. No alarms for damage control, no fire on the horizon, just the steady pulse of radar and the knowledge that the shield had held. The last drone came in low, hidden by the shimmer of the sea. Less than 400 yards from Truman's hull, it slipped beneath the gaze of every missile, every radar sweep, every practiced hand on a launch trigger. For the men and women manning the Phalanx Close-In Weapons System, CIWS, this was the moment every drill had promised, but none had delivered until now. The CIWS, a squat white dome bristling with sensors and a 6-barreled 20mm Gatling gun, spun to life. Its own radar locked onto the threat, ignoring the chaos of jamming and chaff. In that instant, there was no time for debate. The computer tracked, calculated, and fired. 4,500 rounds per minute, a streak of tungsten shells arcing out to meet the drone head-on. The air split with the sound of gunfire, a mechanical roar that drowned out even the alarms. The drone disintegrated mid-flight. Fragments splashed into the water, some so close that the spray reached Truman's hull. The engagement lasted less than 2 seconds. For the crew in the CIWS control booth, it was both everything and nothing. Years of training condensed into a single automatic reflex. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb, hands still hovering over the manual override, later said he never saw the drone, only the green light that meant the system had done its job. On the bridge, silence replaced the tension. No one cheered. The threat had come closer than anyone wanted to admit. The ESM and our AM systems had done their work at distance. But this time, the last defense was all that stood between the carrier and impact. The kill was confirmed at 395 yards, barely 4 football fields from disaster. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a heavy quiet. Below decks, sailors checked for damage that never came. Above, the radar screens cleared. The attack was over. The first combat kill for the Phalanx on Truman's watch was not a victory to savor, but a margin to remember. In those final yards, survival was measured in milliseconds, and the unwavering trust between sailor and machine. Orders traveled down the chain in less than 60 seconds. Captain Christopher Hill stood at the center of the bridge, voice even, eyes fixed on the digital map as coordinates for retaliation blinked into existence. The Truman's Combat Direction Center became a nerve cluster. Satellite feeds, encrypted chat, and targeting data converging on a single outcome. Tomahawk Land Attack Missiles, or TLAMS, were the weapon of choice. Each missile, nearly 20 feet long and weighing over 3,000 pounds, could fly more than 1,000 miles, hugging the terrain, invisible to most radars. The targeting cycle was relentless. Intelligence analysts confirmed launch locations, electronic warfare officers mapped out jamming zones, and strike planners plotted flight paths to avoid civilian airspace. Within moments, the destroyers in Truman's escort formation received their fire orders, precise latitude and longitude, down to the 10th of a second. The launch authorization code was read back, checked, and confirmed. Missile hatches slid open. In the span of a breath, the first Tomahawks leapt skyward, boosters igniting with a muted roar. Each warhead carried a message. No sanctuary for those who threaten the world's arteries. On-board, computers adjusted course in real time, updating targets as new intelligence streamed in. The data flow was constant. Satellites overhead, drones relaying video, growlers mapping electronic signatures. Captain Hill's command was measured, deliberate. He stood amid the whir of machinery and the low murmur of status reports, knowing that every launch meant a ripple across continents. The strike was not a blind reaction. Each target, missile site, drone hangar, command relay, was selected for its role in the attack. The goal was not just to silence the launches, but to shatter the network that allowed such an assault to happen. In under 5 minutes, the first wave of Tomahawks crossed the Yemeni coast. The retaliation was underway. Planned, precise, and unmistakable. At 4:51 a.m., the first headline flashed across international news wires: USS Truman engaged in combat, Red Sea. Within minutes, the world's screens lit up with speculation and satellite overlays, each network racing to interpret the scale of the crisis. But the official story moved faster than rumor. Captain Christopher Hill's communications team drilled for moments just like this, activated their rapid response protocol. Secure video feeds streamed from the ship's flight deck, showing undamaged operations and calm voices over the intercom. The message was unambiguous. The Truman was still on station, still in command. On social media, a different battle unfolded. Houthi channels pushed images of missile launches and claims of victory, while pro-Iranian outlets recycled old footage and digital forgeries. Within the hour, US Navy accounts countered with time-stamped footage. Sailors at their posts, flight operations underway, the carrier's running lights cutting through the pre-dawn haze. Hill's team posted a short video. A cook prepping cinnamon rolls in the galley, a baseball score called out in the background. The time visible on a wall clock. The subtext was clear. No panic, no damage, no retreat. Newsrooms from London to Tokyo scrambled for confirmation. Analysts traced the strike's origin to coordinates outside Al Hudaydah, cross-referencing launch signatures with known Iranian-supplied missile types. Financial markets shuddered. Oil prices spiked, and insurance firms froze new Red Sea policies. Yet the Truman's digital footprint, updated in real time, became the anchor for global reporting. Every official post, every live feed reinforced a single point. American naval power was not just surviving, but controlling the narrative. By sunrise, the story had shifted. The attack was no longer just a regional flashpoint. It was a warning, sent and answered in full view of the world. For every hostile claim, there was a counter-image, a data point, a voice from the carrier's deck. The message was unmistakable. Deterrence was not a theory, but a fact, broadcast in real time, and backed by the ship's unbroken silhouette on the world's most contested waters. At 04:42 a.m., the USS Harry S. Truman faced a barrage of 15 ballistic missiles and more than 20 attack drones, a scale of assault few warships have encountered in the modern era. The ship's survival owed to layered defenses, the Aegis combat system, SM-6 interceptors, and the Phalanx CIWS, which achieved its first combat kill at under 400 yards. Within minutes, US forces carried out precision strikes using Tomahawk cruise missiles and carrier-based aircraft, sending a response that was reported worldwide before dawn. Yet much remains classified. Details of missile trajectories, the full scope of intelligence used, and the specific damage assessments. What is clear, documented by both satellite imagery and global shipping data, is that the Red Sea's vulnerability persists, and the balance of maritime power relies on constant vigilance. The events surrounding the Truman underscore how readiness and rapid response are now central to naval deterrence in one of the world's most contested waterways.
In the darkest nights of World War II, as tens of thousands died beneath the relentless raids of the London Blitz, the world realized terror wasn't limited to daylight. While most armies clung to hopeless searchlights, America unleashed a different answer: a radar-guided predator built to hunt invisible enemies, a technological phantom known as the P-61 Black Widow. This wasn't just the most heavily armed fighter of the war. It rewrote what was possible, giving birth to a new kind of aerial warfare that left enemy crews dreading the darkness itself. Yet, its true story slipped through the cracks of history. Why did the nightmare fighter vanish from legend, and what secrets have been buried ever since? The City of London, 1940. Sirens wail through the blacked-out streets as families huddle in basements and shelters, listening for the distant rumble that means another wave is coming. Night after night, German bombers sweep in over the Thames, invisible but for the drone of engines and the sudden shattering roar of explosives. The Blitz has begun, and the darkness itself has become an enemy. In just 8 months, more than 43,000 civilians are killed. 1 in 6 Londoners loses their home. Searchlights claw at the sky, tracing thin white lines across the clouds. But the bombers are ghosts, untouchable, almost always gone before the anti-aircraft guns can find them. Ground radar gives warning, but it cannot fight. The defenders are nearly blind. Each new raid brings fresh terror. Fire crews race through streets already cratered and burning, while rescue workers dig for survivors in the rubble. Hospitals overflow. The city's heart keeps beating, but every night it is pounded anew. The blackout is total. No headlights, no shop windows, not even the glow of a cigarette. Darkness is supposed to be protection, but in London, it is the weapon of the attacker. Military observers from the United States watch and take notes. Among them is General Delos Emmons, who sees firsthand how the Luftwaffe's night campaign is breaking the rules of war. Conventional fighters, designed for daylight, are useless here. The RAF tries to improvise, sending up Hurricanes and Spitfires in the dark, but they might as well be flying blindfolded. Enemy bombers slip through the gaps, drop their loads, and vanish before anyone can react. The limits of technology are brutally clear. Early radar sets are massive, fragile, and fixed to the ground. Pilots rely on guesswork and luck, chasing shadows. For every bomber shot down, dozens more get through. Londoners begin to dread the sunset. The cost is not just measured in lives lost or buildings destroyed. Morale cracks with every unanswered raid. The sense of helplessness grows. If the night cannot be defended, then nowhere is truly safe. In the war rooms and airfields, a single question hangs in the air. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see? It is in this terrifying void that a new idea takes root. An aircraft that can hunt in the dark, guided not by sight, but by invisible waves. Something radical, something that will change the very meaning of night. The world waits, battered and sleepless, for an answer. Northrop's design shop in Hawthorne, California, buzzed with urgency in the winter of 1941. The Army's contract, signed in January, demanded something the world had never seen: a night fighter built from the ground up to hunt in total darkness. Jack Northrop and his chief of research, Vladimir Pavleka, sketched out a blueprint that broke every rule in the book. Instead of a single fuselage, they chose a twin-boom layout, echoing the P-38 Lightning, but on an entirely different scale. This configuration offered more than just visual drama. It freed up the central nacelle for the three-man crew and the massive SCR-720 radar, a system so advanced it could pick up enemy aircraft from 5 to 16 miles out, even in the worst weather. The booms housed the twin Pratt and Whitney R-2800 engines, each churning out 2,000 horsepower, giving the Black Widow the muscle to carry the heaviest loadout of any Allied fighter. The cockpit was a study in calculated coordination. Up front, the pilot sat high for maximum visibility. Directly behind, the gunner managed the dorsal turret, which could swivel a full 360 degrees and elevate straight up, providing a deadly umbrella of .50 caliber fire. At the rear, the radar operator was cocooned in a bubble canopy, eyes locked on the glowing green scopes of the SCR-720. Communication flowed through intercom, every word and bearing critical as the crew stalked their prey in the black. Integrating the radar was a feat that bordered on obsession. The 415-pound system, with its rotating dish and tangle of cables, required new approaches to weight distribution and vibration damping. Northrop's engineers carved out the nose for the scanner, while the rest of the electronics filled the belly and side panels of the nacelle. The twin-boom structure kept the wings rigid and vibration-free, a necessity for the sensitive radar and for the pilot's control during high-speed intercepts. Armament was uncompromising. 4 20mm Hispano cannons lined the belly, each capable of ripping through enemy bombers with a single burst. Above, the 4-gun turret could be slaved to the gunner, the pilot, or even the radar operator, depending on the threat. This flexibility meant the Black Widow could deliver a wall of fire from any angle, at any moment. Every choice in the P-61's design reflected a single purpose: to erase the advantage of darkness. The twin-boom frame, the heavy guns, the three-man crew, and the radar. Each element was a direct answer to the chaos and helplessness witnessed during the Blitz. By the time the first prototype took flight in May 1942, Northrop's team had delivered not just an aircraft, but a new breed of hunter. The Black Widow was ready to turn the night from enemy territory into American domain. Flying out of Saipan on June 30th, 1944, Second Lieutenant Dale Haberman and his radar operator, Flight Officer Raymond Mooney, cut through the black Pacific sky in their new P-61A Black Widow. Their call sign was Moon Happy. For hours, nothing but static and engine noise. Then, a terse transmission from ground control, an incoming contact, vectoring straight for them. Somewhere out there, a Japanese G4M2 Betty bomber was making its run, confident that darkness would keep it safe. But the night belonged to someone else now. Moon Happy's SCR-720 radar painted a ghostly green trace across the operator's scope. Mooney called out bearings, guiding Haberman until the Betty drifted into invisible crosshairs. The Japanese crew, blind to the threat, kept their course, never realizing they'd already been found. Instead of charging in, Haberman let the bomber pass overhead, then swung his heavy fighter into a tight 180-degree turn, engines howling in the gloom. Now, Moon Happy sat right on the Betty's tail, unseen and unheard. The Betty's escort, a lone Zero, finally caught a glimpse of the Black Widow's silhouette and dove in to intercept. Haberman rolled into a steep dive, the P-61's twin engines roaring as he shook the Zero with a gut-wrenching maneuver. The Zero overshot, left behind in the darkness. Back on the Betty, the crew never saw what hit them. 4 20mm cannons erupted from Moon Happy's belly, tracers stitching a line of fire across the bomber's wing. The Betty pitched, flared, and dropped toward the ocean, trailing flame. The entire engagement lasted seconds. On the ground, the 6th Night Fighter Squadron listened in. The Black Widow had drawn first blood. The message was unmistakable. The Pacific Night was no longer safe for enemy bombers. Radar had turned the tables, and the P-61's firepower had finished the job. From that night forward, Japanese crews learned to fear the darkness they once ruled. For Haberman and Mooney, it was proof that America's nightmare fighter was more than a promise. It was a predator, and the hunt had only just begun. In the summer of 1944, word spread quickly among Luftwaffe and Japanese air crews. The Americans had unleashed something new in the darkness. Stories filtered back to enemy bases, bomber crews vanishing without warning, fighters chased down by an unseen adversary, entire squadrons returning shaken, some never returning at all. The P-61 Black Widow did not simply destroy aircraft, it unhinged the very idea of safety at night. In Europe, the Black Widow arrived just as the V-1 flying bomb campaign was terrorizing London. On July 16th, Lieutenant Hermann Ernst and his radar operator, Edward Kopsel, launched from a rain-soaked English airfield. Their orders were simple: intercept and destroy a V-1 before it reached the city. Ground controllers vectored them onto the target, but the V-1 was a small, fast-moving speck, hard to see, harder to catch. Ernst dove from 5,000 feet, closing to within 900 feet at over 350 miles per hour. The radar operator's voice cut through the intercom, guiding him onto the bomb's tail. Ernst squeezed the trigger. The gun spat fire, and the V-1 exploded in midair, tumbling into the channel. It was the first V-1 destroyed by a P-61, and the first Black Widow kill in the European theater. Word of the Widow's success spread fast, not just among Allied crews, but across enemy lines. German pilots began reporting strange encounters, being tracked at night, stalked by an unseen foe, then suddenly under fire from an angle they couldn't anticipate. Some Luftwaffe crews, convinced they were being hunted by radar, began flying erratic patterns, jettisoning bombs early or hugging the ground at dangerous altitudes. British intelligence intercepted chatter, describing a new American night fighter, one that could see through clouds and darkness, a machine that made even veteran pilots nervous to fly after sundown. In the Pacific, the effect was even more pronounced. Japanese bomber crews, once confident in the safety of darkness, now faced a predator that struck without warning. Reports surfaced of pilots ditching their aircraft into the sea rather than risk a night engagement. On several occasions, Black Widow crews forced enemy planes down through pursuit alone, never firing a shot. Just the threat was enough to send pilots into fatal mistakes. The mere possibility of a P-61 lurking in the black sky changed enemy tactics overnight. Bombing runs grew shorter, less frequent. Some squadrons refused to fly at all unless the moon was full. The Black Widow's reputation grew with every mission. Enemy air crews began to fear not just the loss of their machines, but the sense that nowhere, no altitude, no cloud bank, no shadow was beyond its reach. The night, once a shield, had become a trap. August 15th, 1945. The war is over. At least, that's what the world believes. But on the tarmac at Ieshima, Captain Lee Kendall and his crew are climbing into the cockpit of a P-61B Black Widow, call sign Lady in the Dark. Orders are clear: patrol the skies, intercept anything that moves. Even now, nobody trusts the silence. Somewhere out there, pockets of resistance might still be flying. Kendall's Black Widow lifts off into a night thick with uncertainty. The SCR-720 radar hums in the nose, its sweeping beam slicing through the Pacific gloom. On the scope, a faint blip appears. Ground control vectors them in. Unknown contact, heading south, low over the water. Kendall brings the throttles forward. The chase is on. The enemy pilot, flying a Nakajima Ki 44 Tojo, never sees the Widow coming. He banks hard, desperate to shake the pursuer he cannot see. The Black Widow's engines rumble in the dark, but the crew holds fire. There's no need. The Tojo pitches and dives, cutting back over the waves, frantic to escape. Panic takes the controls. The Japanese fighter wobbles, then drops, straight into the sea. No shots fired, just the relentless pressure of a hunter that owns the night. Minutes later, another contact. Again, Lady in the Dark closes in, radar operator calling out the angles. The second enemy aircraft tries the same desperate dance. Again, it ends in a crash. Another pilot driven to destruction by the presence he can't see. 2 enemy losses, not a single round expended. In the official mission report, the tally is simple. 1 Jap Tojo destroyed. But the reality is stranger. Kendall's crew has delivered a final message, not with firepower, but with fear. On the last night of the war, the P-61 claims the ultimate silent kill. The Black Widow's reign ends not in a blaze of gunfire, but in the eerie quiet of a sky it has made its own. By the time the P-61 Black Widow arrived in numbers, the war's great night battles were already fading. The first production models rolled off the line in late 1943, but it wasn't until June 1944 that Black Widows began regular combat patrols. Jet fighters were already on drawing boards, and the world's attention had shifted to the daylight duels of Mustangs and Thunderbolts. In the final accounting, only 706 Black Widows were built, and most would never see true combat. The end came quietly. With peace came budget cuts, and the Air Force, eager to embrace the jet age, moved swiftly to clear the decks. Hundreds of P-61s were flown to storage yards, their engines still warm from patrol. By 1950, nearly all had been scrapped, melted down without ceremony, their radar sets stripped for parts. Today, only 4 Black Widows remain, silent relics in museum halls and restoration hangars, reminders of a fleet that once owned the night. Yet the Black Widow's influence lingered in ways no headline could capture. The lessons learned from its radar intercepts, crew coordination, and heavy armament set the blueprint for a new generation of interceptors. The Air Defense Command, formed in 1946, assigned its first squadrons to the P-61, using them to develop tactics that would soon be handed down to jets. When the Soviet threat loomed, the Air Force issued a requirement for a new all-weather interceptor, fast, radar-equipped, and crewed by 2. The Northrop F-89 Scorpion, with its twin engines, swept wings, and advanced radar, carried the DNA of the Black Widow into the Cold War. Doctrine 2 bore the mark. Radar-guided interception, ground control vectors, and multi-crew teamwork, all refined in the crucible of P-61 operations. The Black Widow never became a household name. No movies, no parades, just a handful of grainy photos and the stories of those who flew her. But the night fighter's quiet legacy runs deeper than fame. In the long shadow it cast, the rules of air defense and interception were rewritten. The darkness, once a haven for the enemy, would never again be safe. In June 1944, the P-61 Black Widow claimed its first kill over Saipan, proving that radar-guided night fighters could dominate the darkness. By war's end, it had hunted bombers, intercepted V-1 rockets, and achieved the last Allied air victory of World War II, without firing a single shot. Documents show only 4 P-61s survived today, while thousands were scrapped as the jet age dawned. Some technical details about its missions and radar systems remain classified or lost. Yet the Black Widow's innovations, twin engines, advanced radar, and heavy armament, influenced generations of Cold War interceptors. Although overshadowed by more famous fighters, the evidence is clear. The P-61 redefined night combat, Its legacy endures in every modern aircraft designed to control the skies after dark.